Hello, hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm your host, Keenan. Welcome to the June 9th, 2022 weekly DXdao community call, held once again on Twitter Spaces. For those of you not aware, we're experimenting with Spaces in anticipation of Operation Decentralization, DXdao's upcoming and very own live show. We'll be discussing decentralization and a bunch of other fun topics with a bunch of fun guests. So look forward to that. Hopefully a formal announcement early next week. So eyes peeled for that. Today, we're going to be diving into a discussion with the merge, kind of the exciting topic in the Ethereum ecosystem today. A bit about the recent Optimism exploit, and then more on the DXdao side, chatting about our audits and treasury management through Karpatkey, and much more other topics. If you're looking for any live discussion, you can find a chat for this call in our Discord, where we typically have held our community calls prior. You can go to the DXdao handle, I think the host of this call, directly in the profile. You can find the Discord link, and then right at the top of the server, you'll find the mothership text under the voice channels category. That's where we'll be having any text discussion. Am looking forward to a text box of some kind for Twitter Spaces, but not here yet, unfortunately. Yeah, to kick us off, let's chat about the merge. I think most of us, hopefully here, are familiar, and I want this to be a little bit of a open-ended, flexible conversation. But just to kick it off, for those of you that are not, the merge is a planned upgrade to the Ethereum network, migrating from proof of work to proof of stake. Power-intensive hardware is not going to be required to validate the network anymore. Just over the proof of stake. So Ether emissions are going to be more sustainable as well. Obviously, 1559 making things deflationary is already interesting, and mixing that together is a whole other topic. As of yesterday, the merge was successfully executed on Ropsten. And if I'm correct, I think Gurley and Sepolia, maybe? I think we have two more test nets to go through before mainnet. Just seeing John requesting to come back up to the stage. So I mean, that's kind of the current plan with the merge. I'm curious, anyone on stage has any thoughts, insights, any thoughts on their end, I guess, just about the merge?
Hey, Kenny, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, I think this is a big deal, the Ropsten testnet merge, because it's the first time that they've demonstrated the merge on a public testnet. Everything before was sort of these dedicated testnets. So it's a big deal that that went well, and it's like one step closer to the real deal. I think they still have a few more steps, like doing it on Goerli and on the other testnet, and yeah, I think some other things that they want to check out, but it seems like things are on track. And I believe, they haven't committed to any hard dates, but I think what we're looking at is sometime in like the August timeframe, maybe give or take a few weeks.
yeah, that's the other thing for those unfamiliar with the merge, is it's definitely a moving target. I think when was the initial merge date planned for? Was it like early 2021, maybe? I'm not sure if anyone here remembers.
2017.
2017.
That's kind of a joke.
We've been waiting for scalability for 5 years. Yeah.
I do think there was a time when, because really this is, proof of stake has always been part of the Ethereum roadmap ever since the first white paper. And so even though like the chain we all know and love now, this proof of work chain has run so well almost for 7 years, it always was one proof of stake, but it's actually like pretty complicated to do all of that. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of angles to look at here. I guess maybe like with going into like what the merge itself is, and so maybe like the Ropsten one is a good example. Like I guess is the merge just another hard fork to where like the consensus rules are changing and everyone agrees to go to like this new one, but like this new one is not just like a new release of the software on the proof of work. It's like a new, like I was like a new network almost entirely. So like how exactly is that like shift happening from proof of work to proof of stake? John, I don't know if that was a, if you have.
Oh, that's it. So like, how is it actually going to happen?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I
mean,
guess
so,
is it like a hard fork or a soft fork? Like, how do we kind of familiar with those terms for how
yeah,
networks
yeah, I
operate? But
think
this is like another level.
I'm not an expert on this program, but I believe it's a hard fork that'll happen when they actually go live with the so-called merge. And um, yeah, I think the difficulty bomb has actually started. So you can see that the block arrival times are starting to increase on Ethereum. So this is sort of like kind of the clock is ticking for proof of work and the miners, right? But then once the switch is made, then I think it's just like an instantaneous turn off for proof of work. Now, I guess in theory, with any hard fork, you could have both chains continue. Like they could continue with the proof of work chain on Ethereum. I think, like personally, I think that's going to be difficult for any miners to pull off, even if there's some economic incentive to do it, because there's so many dApps and like application layer projects and protocols and even centralized exchanges that are going to pick a winner here, right? And I think the social consensus is pretty strong that like the merge and proof of stake needs to happen, and this is like a core tenet of like Ethereum's value proposition. So I think it's just going to be a switch off, and then that's it for the proof of work miners.
Another interesting thing, kind of piggybacking on that, is proof of work miners. What exactly do you guys feel is going to happen with that? Obviously, there's been a big explosion in GPU mining and like computer hardware being utilized for the Ethereum network. I'm curious if you guys think that that's going to migrate somewhere. I know there's talks of Ravencoin and Ethereum Classic, but I'm not sure if you had any opinions on that.
I think graphics cards are going to be getting cheaper.
Oh man,
Yeah,
that sounds excellent.
Yeah, I have a
gear up the
comment
gaming
about,
PC.
Sorry.
Sorry.
You even mentioned the term in the beginning. Is for many years now, people have been thinking like once we have ETH2, which this is not called ETH2 anymore after the merge, just Ethereum running proof of stake, but that it was always said like, oh, wait till we have ETH2, then things will be more scalable and the network can scale. But at first there's basically when the merge happens, there's no additional scaling or the network getting cheaper that is very clear and apparent. And so that whole but not like if we work in the space, we're probably aware of that by now, that scaling is supposed to come on layer twos and things on top of Ethereum, which is going to be running proof of stake, but maybe it's a little bit more efficient, like economically as a network, and like you're not wasting money on proof of work. But it's not like once this merge happens, it's not like all of a sudden Ethereum becomes the like much more scalable chain or anything. But the world probably, like many people in the world probably still think that is because they heard that in the past. They think that's going to happen when the merge happens, and they may be disappointed by that. And I think a lot of people might be in for a shock, which is an interesting dynamic, because it's the merge happens, we move to proof of stake, but like it doesn't, from a user perspective and doing transactions on Ethereum and things like that, it's probably not going to change that much, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a common misperception, just like you said, Sky, that people think that, ETH2 is going to bring scalability, like cheaper transactions. I mean, in the long-term roadmap, does do that eventually, but like the merge as an event does not effectively really change the like block, like the amount of transaction throughput on Ethereum's L1. So I think the main effects are just that, you're switching off proof of work. So now you're no longer consuming all that energy or wasting all that energy with mining. And I think that's the main thing. In addition to that, you are also now seeing like the fees getting burned as well, right? With the EIP. Like once that switches off, like the issuance is going to change significantly. It's going to go from, most likely the projections are saying that it's going to go from a net like positive. I forget the exact numbers, but it's some millions a day being issued to the opposite, where it's actually some millions of dollars worth of ETH per day being burned. So, yeah, I think the big things are just like, yeah, the environmental impact, the change in the issuance, like level schedule, and also just making this incremental step, which is important uh, on the bigger roadmap, moving towards sharding and other things that will actually like give higher transaction throughput.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Someone messaged me yesterday saying, "Oh, I'm glad the merge is coming. We'll have cheaper transactions." And I was like, "No, it's a change of the consensus layer, not the execution layer and the data availability. So we're still going to have high transaction costs." So yeah, there's not enough information for newcomers in the space to wrap their heads around what's actually happening.
Yeah, the other really interesting thing that's happening in parallel and is very important, but it's complex and not a lot of people in the world probably understand it very well, but is the MEV, is basically MEV. And so, with current miners and things, you have flash bots, you can have ways to, allow, basically bypass, and most of the, like, I think 80% of the current Geth clients are actually MEV or Flashbot Geth clients. So they're their own custom client. In ETH2, that goes away, and Flashbots is creating a whole new system for people to basically access Flashbots in a multi-client world. And the reason why that's important is because, like you said, with fees as one of the things, there's burning fees and there's the fees start going to the validators. MEV of like this rotating set of validators versus like big mining pools and things becomes a very important part of the reward to the validators. And so they are creating a whole new Flashbot system which should run on top of the new proof of stake Ethereum. And that's also something that needs to be highly tested. And it's a key piece of the puzzle, because I think MEV becomes, if there's not Flashbots, MEV becomes very attackable in ETH, in proof of stake Ethereum. So I'm not smart enough to explain all the details correctly, but there's some decent podcasts related to that. That it's a very important part of ETH2.
Yeah, flashbots are a big thing, and a hot topic recently has been the recent MEV Boost proposal, and basically it kind of decentralizes MEV, and validators would be able to compete, but then once someone wins the auction, they can still actually exploit MEV to their benefit. So it kind of like still doesn't benefit users in the end. And as John said earlier, basically the hope for cheaper transactions and for the Ethereum network to scale is really betting on rollups and sharding. And while the merge happens kind of like overnight, sharding is going to happen throughout a longer period. It's not an overnight thing, and it at the moment with rollups themselves are kind of off chain so that they can scale unboundedly, but the bottleneck is still the data availability layer and layer one. So with just rollups alone, we cannot really scale. We need sharding, and sharding being something that will take a long time. Basically, cheaper transactions are far into the future, and sharding itself is not like this magical thing that is going to fix everything, because the shards, like if we think of the 64 shards, the data availability on each of those is not one-to-one with the mainnets we have today. It's kind of like probably half or even a third of that. So if we think of 64 shards, basically we would probably increase data availability by at most 3 times what we have right now. So even in the best case scenario, we don't reduce transaction costs that much.
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan.
And fun fact, sorry. Fun fact, John mentioned the difficulty bomb, and something interesting with the Ropsten testnet merge was a dev realized like a couple of months ago, just hours before a premature merge was about to happen, because some was saying a malicious dev kind of like did this. Others are saying it's just a low hash rate on the testnet compared to mainnet. But basically, although the merge on the Ropsten testnet was planned for the 8th of June, it was about to happen unexpectedly without others expecting it 2 months ago. And a dev noticed it just hours before it happened, and they kind of like prevented kind of like some trouble.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Prevails from the test nets. And I think another kind of interesting question topic that, is probably a bit over my head, but is like the question of like, to what extent is proof of stake going to enable decentralization, right? Like I think the ideal world that we would like to see is, thousands and thousands of stakers, with their, however many validators on their machines, like running them locally, geographically distributed. But there's been like, some interesting points and criticisms of a lot of the, beacon chain validators being run on AWS servers, and also like a concentration amongst the liquid staking pools. I think in particular, Lido has gotten the lion's share of like liquid staking, and some of the, kind of centralization tendencies and risks that creates. So it will be interesting to see how this kind of plays out, and because that's a very important aspect of this, and is kind of a risky part of this whole endeavor, right? And I think centralized exchanges are another kind of point of centralization where they may hold a lot of ether and kind of control a lot of stake. And even if they're not malicious themselves, it could create these centralization points for regulators or governments to target as well. So something to kind of keep an eye on and see how that evolves.
Yeah, thanks, John. Want to give some room here. Welcome to Sidcell to the stage. Wanted to notice your hand a while back that the conversation was a bit tight. Curious if you have anything to add here.
Maybe working on, you're still muted there, but yeah, and I would also add that, DXdao is looking at this in terms of the treasury management and making sure that there's like a responsible diversification amongst the liquid staking providers that are being allocated to with the treasury. So that's good for both the diversification of the treasury, and also for supporting kind of diversification for Ethereum itself, and kind of maintaining some healthy level of decentralization.
Yep, completely agree. Sidcell, if you are still here and or figure out your mic problems.
Yeah, it was actually kind of a joke, but I don't know if anyone has read the book A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but I just feel like when we finally have the merge, it's gonna be like such a disappointment, because we've all been like waiting for this moment for so many years. But yeah, it was funnier a few minutes ago.
Still funny now, but
I'm glad.
Excellent, folks. Shall we chat a bit about Optimism here before heading into the rest of our schedule? I want to chat a bit about it, of course. Going to drop the post-mortem here in the chat. Those of you joining us late, you can find the chat for this call in our Discord. You can click on DXdao's profile to host and find the Discord link in the profile. The first chat at the top, the mothership text, will have all of our discussion So if you're looking for links or anything, you can find it there. But just a couple days ago, Optimism had an exploit, or I guess in my interpretation, a bit of an oversight that caused 20 million OP or OP tokens to be inaccessible by Wintermute, which was the LP service provider they were sending the tokens to. If I'm understanding it correctly, Wintermute did not claim their address on Optimism, and obviously the deployer is different, so I'm not even sure if that's technically possible. And they did not test if they were able to send from that address before. So Optimism did their due diligence of sending the tokens, but should have been a little bit more clear on making sure that they were sendable from that address. So I guess that's a little recap. I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar or has any immediate thoughts.
I only know what I've seen on Twitter, so it's somewhat limited in depth, but it was actually a little bit more than just the fact that Wintermute could not access the tokens because they hadn't deployed their Gnosis Safe on Optimism network. So they basically gave an address to Optimism that they had a Gnosis Safe for on mainnet, but had not yet deployed that same Gnosis Safe getting the same address on Optimism, which takes some effort to get the same address, right? Certain conditions have to be met. Excuse me. And what ended up happening actually when they, and this is where it's a little bit unclear exactly like the sequence of events and how it could have happened, but somebody else, an attacker, actually deployed their safe ahead of them on Optimism with the attacker's address set as an owner, which apparently is not possible in the latest releases of Gnosis Safe. But because Wintermute was using a safe that's like a couple years old, it was on like an older version of the safe, which actually doesn't kind of doesn't like make the address unique to the deployer itself, doesn't like tie it to the actual owner, which was not a crazy assumption to make, a couple of years ago before we had all these different EVM chains, but became a problem here. And so an attacker actually got hold of the 20 million OP, and I read somewhere on Twitter that they had dumped 1 million, and it's unknown kind of what's happening with the rest. So yeah, kind of a crazy attack. But yeah, some basic lessons for everybody, and being careful with your multi-chain transactions.
Yeah, just confirming 1 million was dumped. My assumption is that Op just isn't liquid enough to really dump all the 20 million. So I suspect they'll be, slowly kind of hemorrhaging that. But I also believe I saw somewhere Wintermute is looking to purchase back any Optimism sold.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting was that Optimism is appearing to make a commitment to not roll back the chain or make any kind of changes, which I guess is within their power, because I think they still have, there's still a good deal of centralization with the Optimism rollup in terms of the team controlling the chain, right? It's not decentralized, it's not permissionless yet. So I was actually thought it was interesting that they were committing to letting the attack stand and like just kind of saying, hey, this is permissionless. I suspect maybe part of that calculus is that, it wasn't their fault per se, and Wintermute is agreeing to actually cover the losses by, repurchasing the tokens as they get dumped, right? So there's no actual like ultimate negative effect to like the token supply or like, being dumped. Of course, we have seen the price go down, but ultimately Wintermute is like going to make them whole. So I guess that sort of takes away the motivation to like kind of, modify the chain, and which would also be maybe a negative thing for the Optimism brand and the image that they're trying to create. So, but it's all very interesting.
Sorry, Keenan. Related to DXdao World, this was something that we were discussing, last week, a week ago. DXdao does use, some of its squads use multi-sigs. We have multi-chain multi-sigs. Most of those are created using the latest Gnosis Safe factory. It was discovered last week by the team by DXdao squad that we were not able to get the same safe address on Optimism. We can get the same address on Polygon, Gnosis Chain, Mainnet, Arbitrum, but not specifically not on Optimism. So that's something that we already knew. I guess Wintermute could have asked us. And it's partly, and the reason apparently is because Optimism enforces EIP 155, and that is something that is preventing the current factory from allowing you to use a certain function within their factory that allows you to achieve the same address with the same owners on Optimism chain, which is a pretty unique. I think Augusto, I don't know if he's here, was mentioning that is in general a problem, right? That is for a layer 2 that has kind of different, I don't know if this is opcode or EIP or if there's a little bit of mix of both, that has some differences that people need to be very aware of when they are building in a multi-chain world. These are the things that you only learn, that people basically only learn about when big money gets lost, like in this scenario. And now people, unless they don't pay attention, will probably not make this mistake in this scale going forward again. But yeah, that's why testing and exploring and it's one of the reasons why DXdao multi-sigs has created new multi-sigs that are capable of multi-chain having the same address, because in a multi-chain world, using safes, as we just saw, it can be very dangerous for everyone. And that's interesting, John, your point about an attacker, and this could be an attacker, it could be random, but someone that's able to get that Optimism that same address on Optimism because it was an old factory is something interesting. And I think that's part of the reason DXdao can't do that, because we're using the latest new factory, and so we are specifically not able to get that address on Optimism.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. It must be the difference between the factories that, is preventing us from getting the same address, but allowed this attacker. And again, just from Twitter, but it appears this was definitely coordinated and intentional, because it seems like this attacker address actually deployed some large number of safes to get to the right nonce in order to actually attack the Wintermute safe. But I don't have all the details.
So that is also interesting, because there is a scenario where safes have been created on non-mainnet chains in scale, and it's not random. Maybe, I guess random's not the right word, but it's in order of getting the right nonce, and that allows you to achieve the same safe address as other chains, as mainnet or other chains. But it's almost like brute force attack. I see what you're saying.
It seems in the old factory that it only depends on the nonce. So anybody who kind of gets there, and it sounds like this nonce is a nonce specific to the old factory. Again, I feel like I'm missing some details. I want to actually go look at some code if I get the time. But yeah, it seems like anybody could deploy these old safes if you could simply just deploy that safe in the sequence from the factory that it was deployed in on mainnet. And so what's interesting is this attacker then also has access to hundreds of other old safes on Optimism. And I actually saw some chatter in the ETH security community Telegram about potentially, somebody going out and proactively deploying old safes on new EVM chains so that you prevent an attack like this from happening in the future.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of code is low. I in fact the opposite. But I liken this incident a little to squatting domains, and I don't think the attacker should be called an attacker. It's not really a hack. It's like you are squatting on some. You're poaching some addresses that are nobody's, nobody has really got a claim on them. So you're not doing really anything wrong. And just those guys are just messing up on their own with their ignorance. So, you all, as Sky pointed, you always have to double check if you're not sure. But I'm glad this kind of problem is just about the old and new Gnosis factories, and has it's different on EOA addresses. So it's kind of good news, because otherwise it would have created a huge problem with ENS names, because you know how your ENS domain is associated with an address, and sometimes people automatically think, yeah, you could use my ENS name on this other network. It's the same address. And luckily for EOA wallets, like for EOA addresses, it is, but it isn't for Gnosis safes. So yeah.
So I do think it wasn't an attack in this case, and again, this is, don't quote me on this because it was just from what other people are saying on Twitter, but it seemed like it was a coordinated effort to deploy the old Gnosis safes from an old factory that had just recently been deployed, and to actually like kind of deploy thousands of these to get to the right nonce to be able to take the OP tokens from the Wintermute safe. Like, it wasn't an accidental, what you might call like name collision, where they were doing something on their own and accidentally ended up with the same address. I actually think the chances of something like that happening accidentally, like for just any address, like if you're just creating a new address, it's like infinitesimally small, vanishingly small, and that's what makes crypto networks work, right? The fact that when you get an address, there's the domain space for those possible addresses is so large that the chances of a collision are like vanishingly small. Now, like, you could maybe have other accidental collisions if you were using the same factory or something and that was supported somewhere. But again, this was like the old factory and had just been deployed to help the Wintermute team and Optimism out. So it definitely seemed like a coordinated attack with the intention of like stealing these funds. But yeah, like, it is good that this is just the old safe as well. Like, hopefully this type of attack on safes is going to be very limited and relatively easy for people to avoid. But like we were talking about a little bit earlier, just working multi-chain and like knowing which addresses you have on which chain is a general problem that everybody's going to have going forward, right? So I expect the tooling will eventually kind of rise to the occasion here and make this easier. Sorry, Keenan, am I rambling on too much here?
Yeah.
Oh, not at all. I was just going to interject with malicious intent, I think. Like, it's not necessarily a hack, but it's definitely a malicious action.
One more thing on this, because even though I would say DXdao does not depend on safes, DXdao as a DAO may have some of the most sophisticated safe setups of any entities, organizations, or DAOs out there. And part of the reason is the doing, for example, bridge transfers from layer 1 to layer 2. Like, for example, on Arbitrum, less possible using a safe on Optimism because we can't get the same address. But I'm pretty sure DXdao is the first entity in the world to ever do a bridge transfer from layer 1 onto Arbitrum using Gnosis Safe. And like working with the Arbitrum team to accomplish that, basically the fact that it didn't exist and no one had done it is like proves that DXdao was the first person to do it, basically. And that's going to be more and more important. And so almost all this bridging activity from layer 1 to layer 2, or probably layer 1s to layer 1s, is happening from EOAs. And that often is obviously a big risk that exists in this space, because EOAs could be a lot less secure than multi-sigs. And so you hope that people will start using multi-sigs more for cross-chain transactions. And DXdao has some of the most experience in that, even though, we also do stuff on chain through our DAO.
Yeah, definitely. Just like leading the way in different aspects here. And I was actually catching up with a team this morning called Propeller, and they're working on like a platform that helps manage wallets and transactions and accounting for crypto projects, and they were already kind of talking about this optimism problem that happened yesterday and what they can do inside of their DApp to help kind of mitigate these problems and make things easier for the user. So I think eventually we will get to a point where the tooling has matured and like these sorts of problems, like having the wrong address on the wrong chain are going to be something that the user just never really has to worry about because the software that they're using on top of it will handle all the issues.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for the insights. Really fun to talk broad kind of ecosystem topics, but transitioning now into a little bit more DXdao specific things, I want to quickly give the stage for some recaps. We do have Swapr and DXgov on the agenda. I don't know, Venki, if you'd like to take that away, give us a little sneak peek of what's going on in the Swapr world in the last 2 weeks. Should have an invite. There we go.
Hey, Kenan, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Should I just start with updating the Swapr then?
Yeah, go ahead, Venki.
Okay. So last week we had our beta 12 live, and some of the changes that we saw in beta 12 were the new swap box, and then we also enabled support for Polygon. And through this, we have added a couple of dexes, SushiSwap and Define for Polygon, and now we are currently working through planning for beta 13. So there are like a bunch of features that we are working on. So the first one is bridging through socket. So socket integration will be enabled with Gnosis chain and also with Polygon to mainnet and Arbitrum. And the next one is Connext integration. That also includes Gnosis chain, Arbitrum, mainnet, and Polygon. And then OmniBridge integration between mainnet and Gnosis chain. And we are also working on XDAI native integration right now. Apart from this, we are almost there with updating the DIY farming page. So with this update, we have opened up multiple rewards that could be created by the campaign creator. So until now, it has been only possible that the campaign creator could only reward one token, but now he can choose up to 4 tokens as rewards. And we have also enabled support for creating campaigns for single token staking. So any projects that wants to create a campaign, wants to stake a single token, then yeah, Swapr should be able to handle that. And also a small model for simulation, where the campaign creators can actually simulate how campaigns APIs are going to be set up. What is the expected stake limit that they want to have? Like a bunch of things that are there in the simulation. So that's on the updating DIY farming. And we also are working on CowSwap integration. That would be added as an eco routing option in Gnosis chain, and Uni v3 support as well. So that's on the DApp. Yeah, that's on the DApp that we are working on currently, and some of these features that we are working on will end up in beta 13. That's all that I had.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Venki. I also want to quickly confirm. Can you guys hear me? I haven't seen the speaking icon, and I've been told I'm not being heard.
I can hear you now.
I hear you, Keenan.
Can hear me. Okay. I don't know. I don't really know what's going on. I don't know why it would cut my voice out, but I am here, and sorry for not ushering you in. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Cool. Well, next up we have DXgov. Ross, would you like to give a quick little insight into what you guys have going on?
Sure, yeah. So hopefully you can hear me. Yeah. I think the last Twitter space we gave like a pretty brief update and pointed people towards the Q2-ish update. So if you missed that, you can refer back. Essentially, we've just been kind of executing on that, moving over and splitting up the two applications into DXvault Legacy, which is focused more on stability. Although for anyone that's been trying to use it the past week, you'll know there's been some issues with RPCs across various networks, which is also something we're working on, trying to get some premium options so that we're less reliant on the free RPCs we currently use. And then in the new application, it's now got its own repo for Project Davi. We've been moving up on just continuing development of that. The refactors we've been working on for a few weeks are coming to a close. They're pretty much finished with just a few open PRs left. And so yeah, quite a lot of exciting stuff there. And we actually just got back 2 audit reports right on the same day, which is quite a lot to deal with. But there's that's now given us some more work to do, as well as sort of letting us move forward a bit with potential deployments of some of the contracts for the new wallet schemes we'll be using internally in DXdao and guilds. We have a few improvements to make, but the audit was very good from Sigma Prime. So yeah, we'll just be continuing working on that for the next little while.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ross. Cool. We have a couple other topics today. We could probably go into them for, in deep detail, but just being conscious of the fact that we're 10 minutes off the top of the hour and I don't want to keep anyone too long. Let's be a little more time conscious. But the first topic I wanted to quickly chat about was delegating treasury management to Karpatkey DAO, which is a topic that's been in the forum for some time. We've been discussing it on governance calls, product strategy calls, kind of every call, to be honest. But Chris, I was wondering if you want to give some context onto that thread, the current status and kind of next steps.
Sure, and we'll not be able to capture everything, so we'll first off direct people both to the forum thread or also yesterday's governance discussion when Karpatkey presented. So Karpatkey is a asset manager. They manage currently Gnosis DAO's treasury, which is about $500 million. Those that follow along in the Gnosis forum can see their reports as they outline the various positions that they have taken and adjusted over the previous weeks. So they had been talking with various members of the DXdao community about maybe trying to recreate some types of services from their that they're doing for Gnosis DAO for DXdao. And so this proposal would basically potentially be the first step of that. Now, there are kind of a couple things I think to point out with this. That the first and foremost is this would be a separate type of treasury management than DXdao has done before. So for most of DXdao's treasury management, whether that's the buyback or whether it's liquidity provisioning on Swapr, that's gone through DXdao governance. Now, investment and rebalancing requires a lot of adjustments and things that maybe don't have that can't go through governance. So this proposal and kind of working with Karpatkey would try to maybe bypass some of those governance mechanisms right now in order to implement this more financially sophisticated system through a multi-sig. So that is the discussion that's going on now. There's a lot of back and forth about the opportunity here to earn some additional extra yield on the treasury, but maybe the downside being that some of the treasury sovereignty that DXdao values is lost. Long term, there's a lot of agreement between Karpatkey, DXdao community about the need to build decentralized, trustless infrastructure to manage treasuries for DAOs. This is, I really think, like, as you say, like $1 trillion market that going forward, as all of these pools of capital move on chain, and as they're all managed by these different DAOs and different DeFi protocols, there will need to be smart contract infrastructure that actually facilitates the trading of that does not rely on individual signers or people to kind of like double check. And so that's the type of tooling, decentralized tooling that DXdao wants to build. But that takes time, and there's a lot of things that need to be built in that, especially because this is obviously like would be moving tons and tons of money. So we're trying to figure out how to get towards that future long term. And and the discussion in the forum about maybe engaging with Karpatkey to start building some of that more financial sophistication, while simultaneously also working on building like that trustless infrastructure, so that we can get the financial sophistication without sacrificing DAO sovereignty over the Treasury. Check out the post in the forum and the governance discussion yesterday for more.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for the context. And I've put the forum thread in the chat here on Discord if anyone is looking for it. It is also one of the top discussions in the last week, so it should pop up right away when you're visiting DAO Talk. Next up, I want to quickly highlight the new Swapr farms, which launched about 50 minutes ago. I won't call attention to individual pairs, but I want to quickly mention that the cow pairs, for those of you who are farming cow, those pairs are being deployed in a 2-week cadence. This is because we're waiting for a snapshot vote and movement of some additional cow emissions from the cow DAO. So we have a 2-week kind of interim campaign for cow. You'll need to stake on that and unstake in 2 weeks. And then presumably after the fact, we will have a longer allocation of cow instead of 4 weeks, looking for something like 8 to 12 area. So there'll be a little bit of micromanagement for you cow farmers here in the next week or so. And then hopefully less after the fact. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll be sharing an announcement shortly once we have a little bit more of a confirmation. Besides that, as I mentioned, new Swapr farms, new carrot campaigns are live for GNO and Swapr. You can find those on all of your favorite pairs alongside, like Swapr XDAI, DXd, everything you're familiar with. Cool. And then the last... Sorry, go ahead.
Just make a joke. I do think cow farmers actually prefer cattle farmers or ranchers when referring to them. What is it? Cow wrangler. That was my self-proclaimed title for the first week of deployments. I love cow wrangling. What a fun term. Our last topic here in the last couple minutes, I want to quickly highlight DXdao's state of audits and kind of forward-looking what we have going on with audits, what we have done with audits. So I want to give the stage to you, John, also conscious of the fact that we're kind of at the top of the hour. So maybe just a bit of context and we can point to the form here.
Always a pleasure to be on stage with a Canadian cowboy. But I'll try to be quick. Couple audits are in process, both governance. One is what we're calling like the DX governance audit, which includes components of the existing DAO stack infrastructure that is currently in use, as well as the wallet scheme, which has been developed by the DXgov team. That was audited by Omega, and the audit results were responded to by DXgov, and now we just got the final report back there. We also are having the guild, which is the ERC20 guilds being developed by DXgov, audited by Sigma Prime, and we got the initial report back from Sigma Prime and are currently processing that. This is interesting because Sigma Prime is one of the top auditing firms. It does cost quite a bit of money to work with them, but they are one of the best in the business. And I think we're seeing this in the quality of the report, which will be shared in due time. Once it's kind of processed, we'll be publishing that so that the whole community can see it. And in addition, we are also queuing up audits for Carrot V1. So this is, an iteration on the smart contracts for Carrot, which is live with the alpha system right now. Currently, Carrot, the alpha only supports single ERC20 collateral and using reality.eth as an oracle. The V1 will have a lot more flexibility supporting any types of oracle templates and also any type of KPI token template, meaning that we could have multiple ERC20 collateral NFTs or anything you could imagine. In the initial audit, we'll be including a template for multiple ERC20 tokens. And also with that will come support for multi-condition logic where you can actually weight different conditions with different weights in the Carrot campaign. So this is exciting stuff. And we've got audits kind of lined up with both Omega Team and Sigma Prime for Carrot V1. Hopefully those will both be done later in the summer, kind of towards the end of July. So looking forward to a Carrot V1 release later this year. There's also a couple other smaller things going on with auditing, including we just got the report back for a curve wrapper, which helps Swapr eco routing on Gnosis chain by enabling the Swapr user to trade with the native currency directly instead of having to separately make the step to wrap XDAI themselves. But yeah, I think that covers it. There's some other smart contract stuff coming down the pike, but we'll be talking about that more as we move forward.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, John, for stepping on stage here with the Cow Wrangler. Going to put in the chat here a link, relevant link to those of you that may or may not be aware. We added technical documentation to DXdocs not long ago. So we do actually have a section with all of our previously published audits, and I would assume, John, we'd work together on making sure that's updated after all of these new ones coming in for V1 and guilds.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, fantastic. I think just at the top of the hour here, gonna wrap it up. I'm not sure if anyone has any final questions, concerns, or thoughts, but one thing I wanted to quickly highlight is the DXdao.eth landing page update, which is boosted and expected to finish in a day and 3 hours, I believe. Let's see here. 1 day, 3 hours, 33 minutes. So yeah, coming up tomorrow. This isn't a very massive change, but a lot of broken links and missing information has kind of been rectified. So everything should be a little bit more concise, a little bit more accurate. So that's a fun thing to kind of look forward to on the DXdao.eth front page. But opening the stage up to anyone here with some final thoughts, questions, concerns, topics. And the crowd goes mild. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you very much to our speakers. Very much so appreciate you being up here. We'll see you actually in Discord next week for our weekly community call. Will be happening on Discord stages. And then the week after that, looking forward to hopefully Operation Decentralization, the first episode. But again, pay attention to our socials and Discord and Twitter for a formal update on that, probably early next week. So whether or not the first episode will be the week after next week or it'll be a little bit later. But yeah, we'll see you next week in Discord. You can find the event in the events tab at the top left of our server. So you can find that and pay attention to it. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keenan. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.